Good morning, please take your seat. We're ready to start. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good morning. Welcome to this morning plenary session focused on fundamental freedoms, including freedom of expression, freedom of media, safety of journalists. My name is Andrea Cascone. I'm the permanent representative of Italy to the OSCE, and I have the pleasure to moderate this morning session. OSCE participating states have long recognized that freedom of expression is a fundamental human right and an essential component of democratic societies and comprehensive security. They have affirmed that free, independent and pluralistic media are vital to achieving this right, as set out in numerous OSCE commitments, including the Helsinki Final Act. A key reference point in this area is the Ministerial Council Decision number 3 of 2018 on safety of journalists, which was adopted by consensus in Milan under Italian chairpersonship. This session will focus on the persistent gaps between participating states' commitments to ensuring the safety of journalists and the reality on the ground. Despite MC Decision number 3 in 2018 being described as pioneering and groundbreaking by experts and OSCE officials, attacks, threats, and harassments against journalists remain widespread and are often met with impunity. In addition, the numerous attacks on journalists reporting from war zones in Ukraine and in the context of Russia's war of aggression and other conflict-affected regions in the OSCE highlight the need to shine a light on the safety risk and the danger journalists face. As civilians under international humanitarian law, journalists should be protected. In this session, participants are encouraged to explore how the Ministerial Decision number 3 of 2018 could be used more effectively as both a political and an operational tool to support journalists across the OSCE region. With that, I have now the pleasure to kick off our conversation with the introductory remark, and we have really a great speaker today that I'm sure will provide us with the insightful comments. The first speaker is our dear representative on the freedom of media, Ambassador Jan Bratu, Norwegian ambassador, diplomat, and is the 6th OSCE representative on freedom of media, appointed in December 2024. Somebody very much familiar with the OSCE family, having served as head of mission first in Kosovo and in Serbia. With that, dear Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, dear friends, it's an honor for me to address you today. Together with the Finnish chair, we have chosen to dedicate this year's plenary session to the issue of safety of journalists. There is a temptation to focus on the new challenges, those brought about by new technologies, the effects of AI on media freedom, the surveillance of journalists, information manipulation, cybersecurity. All of these are very concerning developments that certainly do deserve our full attention. But at the same time, we also see a trend that is possibly even more concerning, namely the constant and the widespread erosion of fundamental principles that support media freedom and constitute the very pillars of my mandate. Today's conversation is an effort to reflect on the safety of journalists, their safety as a foundation of media freedom and independent journalism, to take stock of the increasingly dire situation participating states and everybody else in this room are aware of, and the profound gaps that we are facing, as well as our joint responsibilities in this regard. 7 years ago, OSCE participating states came together in Milan and agreed on a clear set of principles, namely the Ministerial Council Decision number 3, 2018 on the safety of journalists. Ministerial Council Decision 318 was not only the important outcome of tough negotiations led by the Italian chairpersonship, but it also represented an important acknowledgement by participating states that independent, critical, public interest journalism cannot exist if journalists fear retaliation for their work. And in joining consensus on this decision, participating states recognized that the safety of journalists is a prerequisite for media freedom, and that media freedom itself is at the very core of our comprehensive security concept. This decision reaffirms the principles enshrined in the Helsinki Final Act and subsequent OSCE commitments, but it goes further. It translates principles into a roadmap for action. It recognizes that threats to journalists are not only physical, but also legal, political, economic, and digital, and where online harassment, AI, and surveillance pose growing dangers. And most importantly, it acknowledges the specific risks that women journalists face and the requirement on all of us to ensure that women's voices are not silenced. But MC Decision 318 is more than a set of principles. It is a call to action. It calls for national laws to be reviewed and reformed, for law enforcement agencies and state bodies to receive training on the safety of journalists, and it tasks participating states to strengthen accountability, to ensure that every attack or threat against a journalist is properly investigated and timely prosecuted. Furthermore, it urges political leaders and public officials to refrain from intimidating or condoning violence against journalists, so as to reduce the risks or threats that journalists may face. When I assumed the mandate of OSCE Representative on Freedom of the Media almost 1 year ago, it was clear to me that MC Decision 318 was going to be the most powerful tool in my hands, both to guide participating states in their efforts to promote media freedom and to hold them to their commitments when they don't. But the sad reality, ladies and gentlemen, is that 7 years after participating states unanimously agreed to these important principles, their implementation is lagging behind. Today's session should be an opportunity to listen to the sober reality of journalism in many parts of the OSCE region, a reality made up of frequent attacks, constant or continual intimidation, and ever more vicious efforts to silence independent journalism. But today's session should also be a wake-up call, a timely reminder not only of the commitments that were made and are often disregarded, but most importantly of the fact that if we don't prioritize media freedom, if we don't prioritize the safety of journalists, if we don't prioritize journalism in general, then we leave our information ecosystem in the hands of those who play with manipulation, propaganda, hate, and disinformation. And that threatens the very foundations of all the other freedoms that we have come to take for granted. Democracies depend on an informed citizenry to function. The freedom of the press is the backbone of democracy and brings transparency to government. One might go so far as to say that it exists to keep government transparent and the human instruments of government honest. If we can't speak out, if those in power cannot be challenged, then there is no guaranteeing any of the other rights that follow. It is of fundamental importance. Some participating states have taken steps towards the implementation of Ministerial Council Decision 318, and together with my office, we monitor progress and encourage an exchange of experiences to ensure that best practices in one country can serve as examples to others. And it is reassuring to see what can be done when the political will exists. With this in mind, allow me to highlight some of the commitments contained in MC Decision 318 and on which urgent progress is needed. Decriminalization of journalism. Journalism is not a crime. Participating states must align their legal frameworks with the commitments contained in MC Decision 318. Laws that criminalize journalism or impose excessive sanctions must be repealed or reformed. Accountability and justice. Every attack on a journalist must be promptly, independently and effectively investigated, impunity does send a dangerous signal that violence against the media is tolerated or even encouraged. Digital security. States should support measures that protect journalists from surveillance, cyber attacks, and online harassment. This includes technical tools, legal safeguards, and effective law enforcement responses. Gender-sensitive protection. Special attention must be given to the unique threats faced by women journalists, with measures designed to address and prevent gender-based harassment and violence. Data collection. Decision number 3/2018 calls on states to collect and publish reliable data on threats and attacks. Without accurate information, we cannot understand the scale of the problem or design effective responses. And finally, prevention and capacity building. Beyond responding to attacks, we need preventative measures, safety training for journalists, early warning systems, and cooperation between media organizations, law enforcement, and civil society. So, dear colleagues, media freedom is not an abstract value. It is a cornerstone of human rights and democracy. It is the light that allows societies to see clearly. And as some said some years ago, democracy dies in darkness. And it is the foundation of the comprehensive security approach that defines our OSCE. When journalists are silenced, societies are left in darkness. But when journalists are safe, I firmly believe that our societies are more resilient and safer. Ministerial Council Decision 3/2018 was indeed a milestone. It was also a promise to protect those who inform us, to defend those who hold power to account. So today, I urge all of us to move steadfastly and on principle basis from commitment to implementation. We have no time to lose. It is of fundamental importance. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you to the Finnish chair for focusing and prioritizing these issues. Thank you.
I thank you, Representative on Freedom of Media, dear Jan, for these very powerful remarks. Indeed, the success of OSCE ministerial decision is not just about their approval, but more importantly about their implementation. Now, the next two speakers will bring to this floor the views from the field. The first one I have the pleasure to introduce is on my right, Ms. Gulnoza Said, Europe and Central Asia Program Coordinator at the Committee to Protect Journalists. Gulnoza is a journalist and a press freedom advocate with over 25 years of experience in New York, Prague, Bratislava, and Tashkent. Since 2016, she headed the Europe and Central Asia Program at the Committee to Protect Journalists, which is a New York-based independent non-governmental organization that promotes press freedom and defends the right of journalists to report the news safely and without fear of reprisal. With that, dear Gulnoza, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador Cascone, dear Ambassador Bratu, Excellencies, conference participants. Since we gathered here a year ago, the situation with press freedom and safety of journalists has deteriorated around the world, including in the OSCE region. Unfortunately, some of the world's largest democracies are not immune to this decline. Last week, an award-winning journalist, Mario Guevara, was deported from the United States after first being detained in June in retaliation for his reporting on police and immigration enforcement activities. He was authorized to work in the United States, but the authorities said Guevara's work presented a danger to society. His case sends a chilling message to all journalists in the United States who dare to hold power to account amid an increasingly hostile media environment. This year, the U.S. administration has made significant cuts to foreign aid. The decisions to eliminate the U.S. Agency for International Development, shut down the National Endowment for Democracy, dismantle the U.S. Agency for Global Media, and reorganize the State Department's human rights offices and programs has had a detrimental impact on media sustainability and safety of journalists. We at the Committee to Protect Journalists have heard firsthand about the impact of these cuts from journalists on the ground. From Ukraine, where 9 out of 10 media outlets rely on grants from foreign and international organizations, to Moldova, where I just met with government officials to discuss the challenges media are facing amidst Russian disinformation and propaganda, to Georgia, where media are not able to access foreign assistance anymore because the authorities adopted a foreign agent law. After this conference, I'm traveling to Prague, which has housed the US Congress-funded broadcaster Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty since the end of the Cold War. RFRL has also been going through cuts and furloughs, along with its sister organizations, Voice of America and Radio Free Asia, because of the US administration's decision to dismantle them. For decades, these outlets have provided authoritative reporting to audiences deprived of free information. Their journalists often worked risking their life and freedom because authoritarian governments consider them enemies, and now they are left in grave danger. CPJ urges the United States to reverse the decisions about funding cuts and resume supporting journalists and media that reach hundreds of millions of people around the world. The OSCE is the largest security organization in the world. In the OSCE region, Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine continues to pose serious threats to journalists and media workers reporting on the conflict and beyond. French journalist Anthony Lalican's killing on Friday is the most recent tragic example, and we will probably hear more on that from my co-panelist, Mr. Koval. CPJ's 2024 prison census found that Russia is in the top 5 biggest jailers of journalists in the world, with 31 behind bars. Almost half of them are Ukrainian journalists. Victoria Roshina, a brave journalist who was captured by Russian forces while trying to report from the occupied territories, was tortured and killed in Russian captivity. Among those in Russian prisons are also ethnic Crimean Tatar journalists who were working to report the truth from the Crimean Peninsula after its annexation in 2014. They have been serving lengthy prison terms, some of 20 years, on terrorism charges. Any meetings and peace talks with Russia must include the demand to release all those journalists. Belarus is the largest jailer of journalists in the OSCE region, with 33 journalists behind bars when CPJ conducted its most recent prison census. We welcome the US government's work on the recent release of several journalists in Belarus, as well as of Ukrainian journalist Vladislav Yesipenko from a Russian prison. However, both Belarusian and Russian authorities continue the systematic crackdown on the last remaining independent media, and the foreign aid cuts have impacted hundreds of journalists working in exile. Azerbaijan has been relentless in prosecuting independent media. 27 journalists and media workers are now held behind bars, double of the number we reported in December. In Central Asia, Tajikistan holds the highest number of journalists in jail, 9 as of today. Among them is veteran journalist and human rights defender Ulfat Khanım Mamatshoeva, who is serving a 20-year sentence on anti-state charges. Kyrgyzstan used to be the champion of human rights in Central Asia. Not anymore. It has stepped up repressions against independent media. 3 journalists are in jail there as of today. Many journalists had to flee the country in fear of prosecution. In Georgia, another freest country until just a few years ago, journalist Mzia Amaglobeli was sentenced to prison in retaliation for her work. Georgian authorities started implementing the FARA-type law targeting media that had received foreign funds. Of course, the number of journalists in jail is not the only criterion that reflects the press freedom environment in a country. Turkmenistan, which doesn't allow any free speech, has banned journalists from traveling abroad. Nurgeldi Halikov, who was released from prison last year after serving 4 years in retaliation for reporting on COVID for a Netherlands-based media, and Sultan Achilova, a veteran journalist, are among those who are not allowed to leave the country. One other criterion that reflects the situation with press freedom and journalist safety is impunity in killings of journalists. Globally, CPJ's 2024 Impunity Index found that no perpetrators were held to justice in almost 80% of cases. Full justice has yet to be achieved in the killings of journalists Jan Kuciak in Slovakia, Daphne Caruana Galicia in Malta, Peter de Vries in the Netherlands, Georgos Karaivas in Greece. These countries are not only members of the OSCE, but also of the European Union. In EU member aspirant country, Serbia, full justice in the 1999 killing of journalist Slavko Čuruvija remains elusive. The fight to end impunity cannot be achieved without holding Israel accountable for its unprecedented assault on the press in Gaza and across the region. The OSCE participating countries should take an active stance. Yesterday marked 2 years of the Israel-Gaza war, during which Israel has killed at least 235 journalists in Gaza, Yemen, Lebanon, and Iran. A total of 59 journalists and media workers were deliberately targeted and killed by Israeli forces, cases that CPJ classifies as murders. We are still investigating many other cases. Throughout these 2 years, not a single journalist from the OSCE region or anywhere in the world has been permitted independent access to Gaza. It is your job as individual governments and collectively to demand that Israel stop targeting journalists and allow independent international probe into journalist killings. You should put pressure on Israel to open access to Gaza for international media. A state that murders journalists must be held accountable. Any forms of support to Israel must be conditional on Israel respecting international human rights and humanitarian law. This includes ensuring civilians have access to humanitarian aid and medical treatment and are able to leave Gaza. Dear conference participants, every year we all gather here for 2 weeks to discuss various aspects of human rights. The organization has a large potential to improve the media freedom environment in its participating states. CPJ commends the work of the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, whose monitoring and engagement is an important support for journalists. We call on all participating countries to fully support Ambassador Bratu in his mission. We call on member states to challenge press freedom violations and to hold each other accountable, including utilizing the Moscow mechanism more regularly and fully. The OSCE has to be more robust in its actions to prevent the serious backsliding that we are seeing in so many OSCE participating states. Furthermore, member states' assessments of their own press freedom records do not often match the reports of the hostile environments in which so many journalists work. We want to see OSCE members taking real action around the Ministerial Council Decision 318 on the safety of journalists. Concrete, measurable improvements in terms of press freedom reforms are needed more than ever. But reforms must be credible and receive the trust of journalists. This is the litmus test. Thank you.
Thank you, Gulnoza. The staggering number of cases you mentioned in your speech is a stark reminder of the reality, actually, we are operating in and the need to address these challenges. You mentioned also Ukraine in your speech. And this is going to be the focus of our next speaker, Valentin Koval, First Deputy Head of the National Council of Television and Broadcasting of Ukraine. Valentin is experienced in a wide range of expertise and has recognized skills from creative production and media technology to business management and lawmaking. During his successful career focused on media for almost 40 years, he always was at the edge of technological progress and a point where technology meets creativity in mind. With that, Valentin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you understand that Europe now is divided in two parts. One part is under the great aggression and war, and another part of Europe is still peaceful. But we should understand that information war is going across the whole Europe. So we should take into account every fact that goes from Ukraine to understand how it could be reflected in Europe. What I want to say is that Ukrainian cemeteries are full of freshly dug graves. Hundreds of candles are lit every night in central squares of Ukrainian cities across the country. The death toll is in the tens or maybe even hundreds of thousands, but we are remembering by name each of 113 media professionals who suffered as a result of Russian aggression against Ukraine. 13 of them were killed while performing their professional duties. I should say that when I prepared this speech previous week, numbers were less, but during the weekend we got two more attacks, and we have an Italian photographer, French photographer who is killed, and Ukrainian photographer who is injured and now struggles for his life. And we realized that for Russia, Helsinki Accords were just a cover for its action in the exactly opposite direction. Out of the 50 years that have passed since the adoption of those agreements, Russia was not waged a war only for 4 years. The civil freedoms never happened in Russia, but today it is Russia that insists on the implementation of these freedoms by Europe. It is true that any conventional war is preceded and accompanied by an information war. And it is equally true that preparation for aggression must begin with changes in consciousness of a nation. This process has been going on in Russia for 25 years. A whole new generation has grown up with continuous informational aggression and lies, and the minds of older generations have been completely reprogrammed. This was all done by Russian propagandists who called themselves journalists and still call themselves journalists, although in fact they were not or stopped to be from the moment they sided with the ideas of superiority, domination of one nation over another, the ideas of aggression. No matter how we perceive what happened in the early morning of 24th February 2022, no matter how we consider this invasion as unexpected, the whole nation was ready for the aggression. The whole nation participated in this aggression, not under duress, but quite consciously, confident in their rightness, willing to destroy the democratic state of Ukraine. Russia still demands, based on the democratic principles enshrined in Helsinki documents, that all standards of fair journalism have to be respected. And these principles are happily supported by European journalists, and even global journalistic organizations who do not understand the difference between journalism in times of peace and journalism in times of war. When 10 years ago, Ukraine, defending its information space, banned Russian and pro-Russian media, criticism came even from these OCSE walls because Russia felt itself a legislator of freedoms in the OCSE. Times has changed, but we still see Russian top officials being thoroughly quoted by European media. I want to be clear. Just as criminals have no place in the homes of decent people, so international criminals should have no place on pages and screens of decent media. Every media outlet that continues to quote and preserve the narratives of the Russian ruling elite and propaganda machine is working for the aggressor. For me, it's the fact, sorry. We are also witnessing how formally and reluctantly sanctions against the Russian media are being formulated and implemented. European telecommunication giants still continue to provide services to Russian propaganda media, including those who operate in the occupied Ukrainian territories. The National Council has vast experience in how media work during war and are ready to share it in all levels because the practice of media in the peace times is absolutely not ready for the transition to a wartime. It is in the first days of the full-scale aggression, we did a lot of things that we should have done days before, from establishing rules for accreditation and journalists' presence in combat zones to a list of how-tos that ensure the safety of military and civilians, restrained the dissemination of sensitive information about troop movements, impacts, information, and the presence of military personnel in certain locations. We welcome our colleagues from some countries who are already trying to learn from this experience and would be happy to expand the circle of interested organizations. Regarding countering disinformation, Ukraine has several powerful organizations which are our partners. They are filter-operated by the Ministry of Culture and Strategic Communications and the Center for Countering Disinformation operated by Council of the National Security and Defense. And we also have many of those specializing in narrower areas. Sure, it's very important to debunk propaganda fakes, but the secondary nature of this approach is constantly evident. Of course, the information space is unlimited, but the time each person spends consuming information is limited. Therefore, it is extremely important to increase the amount of truthful, objective, and up-to-date information to fill the information pipe and leave no room for disinformation and propaganda. But let's go to the main topic, the freedom of expression. There are no rights without responsibility for their misuse. In peacetime, we say, following Kant, your freedom ends where the freedom of others begins. In a wartime, this axiom replaced by your freedom ends where the integrity of state and the security of society begin. A peaceful Europe would probably have to reinvent the list of principles of honest journalism, but be prepared to get criticism from Russia, which in words still stands for the Helsinki Accords, but on the ground, as a politician now accustomed to saying, it is driving tanks, trucks over these agreements and trampling on the boots of soldiers recruited in prisons. Unfortunately, the metaphor Russia is a prison of nations remains true not only as a metaphor, and we must not allow this prison to grab our free lands. Thank you.
Thank you, Valentin. I had the pleasure and the opportunity to visit Kiev together with some OSCE ambassadors in July, and we saw with our own eyes the resilience of the Ukrainian civil society and of Ukrainian media, which they will play definitely an important role also in the reconstruction of the country. With that, we now are ready to open the floor for the statements. Before doing so, allow me to remind few House rules. You have already heard them, in the previous days, but as my ancestor used to say, repetita iuvant. So first, when given the floor, please introduce yourself, give your name and the organization you represent. If you have registered with multiple names, remind to use the name you have registered. You may only take the floor on their behalf. Please be mindful about the time. You have 3 minutes for your statement, and I will make sure you will stick to that. Keep your contribution brief and on the topic, and I remind that, and facilitate the work of interpreters by speaking clearly and slowly. The proceeding should be held in a respectful manner in line of conduct that you have agreed on when you registered in this conference. All conference participants may submit written documents online via the conference platform, where they will be made available for all registered participants. Delegations of the OSCE participating states may exercise their right of reply regarding any statement made by any other participant in line with the meeting rules. Rights of reply must be announced at the head table during the session and then submitted in writing online to the conference platform. Any registered participant wishing to raise a procedural issue will be able to do so directly with the representative of the CIO at the head table and not from the floor. All meeting rules and the code of conduct, I remind, are published at the event website and apply to all events held at the conference, including the plenary sessions, side events, and other areas of the event venue. With that, we start with our opening remarks. our statement. The first in my list is the delegation of Sweden. Madam Ambassador, dear Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I make this statement on behalf of the EU with the following states aligned: Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Norway. And I deliver a shortened version, and the full statement will be circulated. Democracy, human rights, and the rule of law are at the core of the comprehensive concept of security. Freedom of expression, media freedom, and the safety of journalists are essential for fulfilling our commitments and international obligations in this field. They are central priorities for the EU internally and externally. Civil society, journalists, and other media actors are indispensable in holding states accountable. We are concerned by growing threats to journalists and other media actors, both online and offline. Women journalists face heightened and gender-specific risks. The link between security and media freedom is starkly illustrated in situations of armed conflict, particularly in the context of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Several credible and independent reports indicate that journalists have been killed, arbitrarily detained, subjected to torture, and enforced disappearances. Perpetrators must and will be held accountable. We call on Russia to respect international law and to comply with its international commitments, including protecting journalists and media actors reporting from armed conflict in accordance with IHL. Russia's aggression against Ukraine, enabled by the Lukashenko regime, starkly reminds us that internal repression and external aggression go hand in hand. In Russia, authorities continue to increase the systematic repression by cracking down on independent media, journalists, and media actors and other critical voices. In Belarus, we strongly condemn the persecution and intimidation campaigns against all segments of society, including independent journalists and media actors, among many others. We share the concerns expressed by the RFOM about the situation in Georgia, where we have seen a deterioration of the situation for media and journalists, including arbitrary arrests and increasing repression. Notwithstanding the EU's ongoing commitment to Georgia's security, we are concerned regarding the worsening political and human rights situation in the country. We also share the RFOM's concerns about the cases of Absaz Media, Toplum TV, Maidan TV, and imprisoned journalists, which show that pressure on journalists in Azerbaijan is increasing. We call on the country to uphold its international obligations, including on human rights, and to take immediate steps to ensure a safe and enabling environment for all journalists and media workers. In Turkey, particularly worrisome is the continued systematic lack of independence and the many restrictions on freedom of expression, media freedom, and dissemination of information. Media freedom and pluralism are a vital part of democracy. Independent and pluralistic media are key in upholding checks and balances that sustain democratic governance. New measures aim to further strengthen media freedom in the EU, including the European Media Freedom Act and new rules to counter abusive lawsuits against public participation. This reflects the EU's commitment to fostering a free, diverse, and resilient media space. We encourage all states to respect, protect, and fulfill freedom of expression, media freedom, and the safety of journalists, to implement all OSCE commitments in this field, and to make use of the tools and expertise offered by the RFOM. Thank you.
I thank you. Next in my list is Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan. You have the floor.
Здравствуйте. Благодарю за
Good morning. Thank you very much for the possibility. My name is Zamanbek Kluyev. I am the coordinator of the headquarters of the Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan. I would like to pay attention of the governments of OSCE countries to worsening situation of the freedom of speech and safety of journalists in Kazakhstan. Despite declarations by Tokayev about protection of the freedom of press, independent journalists face permanent persecution. Journalists have been convicted to long terms of imprisonment for their professional activities and independent civic position. Their life and health are in danger because the government continue pressure on them even inside of prison. They are denied to receive, journalists are denied accreditation. The Ministry of Internal Affairs refused to give accreditation to journalists of Azar Peak. Incident with Idok Sadikov was killed in June in 2024 in Kiev. Evidence show that Kazakhstan's secret services have relation to this incident. However, despite the official request by Ukraine, information is not provided. False information in the internet also deserves an attention. Tokayev declares that work is being done with young people to educate them. In fact, it is a pressure on lawyers and journalists and all those who protect human rights. The lawyer Karayev faced persecution due to his activity. Also, authors of satiric public in the internet, for example, Temilan was convicted to 5 years of imprisonment for his satiric content in the internet, and his program was closed. Also, the government bought the special software from China, which enables blocking and search the content. I would like to ask the governments of OSCE countries to stop persecution of journalists and lawyers, restore their rights, provide safety and security of journalists and human rights defenders, provide freedom for press. Free press and free lawyers, human rights defenders are very important condition for freedom in the country. Thank you very much for your attention.
Gentlemen, colleagues, my name is Diana Akrimova. I'm a head of Legal Media Center, an NGO in Kazakhstan that protects journalists. And I'd like to focus your attention on some problems in our media sphere. Recent amendments to Kazakhstan's media legislation were introduced under the pretext of combating disinformation. However, in practice, these measures have been used to restrict independent journalism and civic debate. The legal concept of false information remains overly broad and unclear, giving authorities wide powers to block content or prosecute individuals for expressing opinion online. In many cases, journalists and bloggers are punished not for spreading false information, but for minor factual inaccuracies, which then used as a pretext for pressure. The recent examples are absolutely ridiculous cases of Radio Freedom and journalist Kirill Pavlov. Another serious problem is access to information, particularly on sensitive topics such as peaceful protest, political change, or public spending. And also I want to mention the new law on mass media. While Europe has adopted the Media Freedom Act, aimed at strengthening journalistic independence and safety, Kazakhstan has passed a law that could be described as a law on state regulation of media. The main section of this law focuses on the powers and control mechanisms of the Ministry of Information, but not provision that guarantee journalist independence, safety, and protection from censorship. And my colleague will continue.
Всем добрый день. У меня заявление о ситуации.
Yes, hello everyone. I would like to report about the case. For example, some of our journalists were refused. According to the recent research, the Kazakhstan journalists were equal to the European ones and were rejected to perform the professional activity. So they cannot be accredited. That's actually the case because nowadays the law case is Kazakhstan, and actually we do not know whether the journalist will ever get back to their professional activity. Why did it happen? Because unfortunately, the state has got the exclusive right for censorship. That's why we challenge the situation with the violation of international Kazakhstan obligations to revise the principles of accreditation and to demand the grant changes in the legislation in order to avoid deliberate targeting journalists. Thank you.
Human rights, followed by the delegation of Finland. Azerbaijan Institute, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dear delegates, distinguished guests, my name is Ahmad Shahidov. I represent Azerbaijan Institute for Democracy and Human Rights. And today I would like to speak about one of the most alarming realities of our time, the systematic killing of journalists in conflict zones from Ukraine to the Middle East. Freedom of the press is the cornerstone of every democracy, yet in today's world, telling the truth has become one of the most dangerous professions. Let me begin with ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Since February 2022, at least 70 journalists and media workers have been killed, many of them while documenting attacks on civilians. Ukrainian photojournalist Max Levin was executed near Kiev after being captured by Russian forces. French reporter Frédéric Leclerc-Imhoff was killed by shelling in Lugansk. Dozens of Ukrainian and international journalists have been injured, detained, or disappeared while reporting from the front lines. This is not just numbers, they are lives. Men and women who believed that truth can save lives. They carried cameras instead of weapons, but were treated as enemies. The same tragedy on an even larger scale continues in the Middle East today, where the number of journalists killed in Gaza and the West Bank has reached over 130 since October 2023. Among them were respected Al Jazeera journalist Shirin Abu Akleh, deliberately shot dead in Jenin in 2022 while clearly marked as press, and Samir Abu Dakka, who bled to death in Khan Yunis last December after Israeli forces blocked medical access. These were not isolated incidents. They reflect a pattern of targeting media professionals. Even Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau was bombed. Several independent media offices were destroyed. It was not only about killing journalists, it was about killing the story. And yet the global response remains deeply selective. When a Western journalist, European journalist is killed, the outrage is immediate. But when a Palestinian journalist is killed, the world looks away. This double standard undermines the universal principles we are here to defend. The OSCE has a crucial responsibility, not only to issue statements, but to establish mechanism of accountability. Every journalist killed in conflict must be counted, investigated, and remembered. Impunity must end. As someone who comes from the South Caucasus, a region that has also witnessed wars and media repression, I know how vital it is to protect those who tell the truth. In Ukraine, in Middle East, and beyond, our safety as societies begins with the safety of journalists. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Next is the delegation of Finland. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, distinguished chair. My name is Tanja Leikas-Botta, and I'm the Human Rights Policy Director from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Finland. Finland aligns itself with the statement of the European Union and would like to add the following in its national capacity. Freedom of expression, freedom of the media, and the safety of journalists are increasingly challenged in the OSCE region and beyond, even though the OSCE participating states have long recognized that freedom of expression is a fundamental human right and an essential component of democratic societies and comprehensive security. The work that the OSCE and the Office of the Representative on Freedom of the Media carry out to implement the principles and commitments in this regard is of great importance. Finland strongly supports the independent role of the OSCE autonomous institutions. Finland promotes the realization of the freedom of expression, media freedom, and safety of journalists, both offline and online. media freedom's critical role in promoting and protecting human rights and its link to security is particularly evident in situations of armed conflict. We remain highly concerned about the risks faced by journalists and media actors in the context of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. During its chairpersonship this year, Finland underlines all aspects of comprehensive security, including emphasizing citizens' media literacy and freedom of the media in the fight against disinformation. These topics are high on our agenda as Finland is currently also the co-chair of the Media Freedom Coalition. Let me take this opportunity to extend an invitation to our side event today at 2:30 p.m. in this plenary hall. It's organized jointly by the Media Freedom Coalition's two co-chairs, Finland and Germany, and the Media Freedom Coalition Secretariat. And it will explore three interconnected themes that highlight the critical role of women journalists in promoting media freedom and democratic resilience. I thank you.
And I thank you. Next in my list is CivilNet TV. You have the floor.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ani Grigoryan. I am a journalist from Armenia representing CivilNet TV, where I lead our fact-checking unit. Today, around the world, journalists face growing threats, from censorship to intimidation and violence. In South Caucasus, the situation is no different. In Azerbaijan, free media is almost non-existent, and journalists remain imprisoned, while mounting pressure on civil society and independent media in Georgia serves as a warning for the entire region. In Armenia, independent media faces its own challenges. In recent years, we have witnessed a wave of slap lawsuits, legal actions designed to silence journalists. Rather than engaging with legitimate inquiries, politicians often target independent outlets, with lawsuits seeking heavy financial penalties. As the 2026 parliamentary elections approach, we are witnessing a troubling surge in disinformation, with fake media platforms, social media accounts, and coordinated networks disseminating false narratives to influence public opinion. However, perhaps the most concerning trend is the escalation of foreign information manipulation and interference in Armenia's information space. This hybrid warfare targets minds rather than territories. One of the key actors is Azerbaijan. Despite the peace rhetoric, Azerbaijan continues to spread disinformation and divisive narratives against Armenia. At the same time, Russia has intensified its influence operations, echoing tactics seen in Ukraine and Moldova, and seeking to discredit Armenia's cooperation with the EU and the West, portraying them as threats to our sovereignty and identity. Unfortunately, Armenia's public remains highly vulnerable to such manipulation. Media literacy remains low, and state institutions are insufficiently equipped to protect citizens from large-scale information attacks. In this context, independent and professional journalism is not only a source of information, but also a crucial line of defense for democracy. Yet our media landscape remains fragile and deeply polarized, which makes the few truly independent outlets all the more vital. Following shifts in the US and other international donor priorities, many Armenian media outlets are now struggling to survive. Continued support from our international partners is not a luxury, it's a necessity. The future of Armenia's democracy depends on the courage of our journalists and the solidarity of our partners. We ask for support not out of weakness, but because truth needs allies, and free journalism is democracy's first line of defense. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam, for your statement. The next in the list is Public Union for Gender Equality and Women Initiatives. You have the floor.
Thank you. Nigar Ramazanova, Public Union for Gender Equality and Women Initiatives. Mr. Moderator and dear participants, freedom of the press and safety of journalists are key pillars of democracy. Unfortunately, in conflict and post-conflict areas, this safety is often under serious risk. Azerbaijan knows this painful reality. In 2021, two journalists, Mahir Sherifov and Siraj Abushov, died in Kelbejar because of a landmine explosion. The lack of full full mind maps was one of the main reasons for this tragedy. This is not only a problem for my country, but for the whole world. According to the United Nations, in 2024, 82 journalists were killed in conflict and war zones. This number shows how risky the fight for freedom of expression can be. Journalists risk their lives to bring the truth. Their safety must be a common responsibility of the international community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next in the list is Political Movement Group 24. You have the floor.
Я Дилшод Шарипов из группы 24.
I'm Dilshod Sharipov from the Group 24. Despite the formal constitutional guarantees in the country remains the monopoly. Independent voices are marginalized. Access of society to information is lacking. Journalists, activists, and human rights defenders are being persecuted. We ask the governments of the countries OSCE, all the institutions, international institutions know who the leader of our country is. Yes, we report on the facts of tortures and crimes of this criminal regime. See, there is no representative of Rahmon's regime in this hall. They ignore all the requirements of the organization, do not complete do not comply with their obligations. In May this year, so-called parliamentary elections took place in the country, and the observers from OSCE were not allowed to accomplish their mission. In this country, the dictators become stronger. It is time that OSCE takes an action. It's been almost 4 years that Russia is conducting the aggressive war against Ukraine. If you cannot exclude Russia from the organization, exclude Rahmon regime. You say that there is no procedure to exclude from the organization. Why can't you change the statute, the charter of the organization? Look at this half an empty room. The 50th anniversary conference is taking place here. There is no due attention of the international media. There are just few journalists, a few photographers. OSCE imitates the activity. Do you need a quality or a quantity? If you need quality, please take into serious attention and limit the number of the members. And the last but not least, please ask the members and participants about their activities. I am sure that the answer you will receive will not be satisfactory for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next in my list is Gizilbash Youth Education Public Union. You have the floor. Do we have in the room Gizilbash? Okay. Sorry. Well, we go to protection of rights without borders.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Distinguished delegates, my name is Hasmi Karutinyan. I represent the local NGO Protection of Rights Without Borders from Armenia. Although the Armenian constitution and legal framework formally guarantees freedom of expression, the practical reality reveals growing concerns about its erosion. In recent years, the misuse of legal mechanisms, particularly court cases, has increasingly become a tool to punish individuals for expressing dissenting or controversial views. This troubling trend is especially evident in politically or socially sensitive cases leading to imprisonment, where criminal charges have been initiated solely on the basis of public statements or speeches. These cases often involve interpretations that are legally and ethically disputable, raising alarms about selective enforcement and the shrinking space for free speech in the country. Independent and investigative outlets operate relatively freely in Armenia, and they generally publish online. However, there is a problem with the state of media landscape. The number of genuinely objective and independent media outlets remains limited. Most media channels are either aligned with the opposition or function as supporters or satellites of the ruling party. Notably, public television is widely perceived as lacking impartiality, primarily broadcasting narratives favorable to the authorities and offering a platform predominantly to their supporters rather than reflecting a diversity of viewpoints. Moreover, in the last 2 years, the number of slap cases has increased in which environmental activists, community leaders, or independent journalists are targeted. In at least 33 documented cases for the last 2 years, officials or large corporations used litigation as a tool to suppress criticism. While the legal framework of defamation in Armenia is not as strict as outright criminal statutes, it still offers substantial room for abuse, particularly due to the absence of anti-slap mechanism. It's also alarming that public officials, particularly those from the ruling party from the highest political level, frequently use social media platforms to exercise their freedom of expression in ways that often involve language contrary to public morals, promoting an inappropriate culture of speech that is unbecoming of public servants. Last but not least, it's important to mention that freedom of expression in Azerbaijan remains severely restricted, and ensuring this fundamental right is not only crucial for democratic development within the country, but also essential for fostering mutual understanding and trust with Armenia in a broader peace process. I thank you.
Thank you, Madam. I'd like to try again to call Kizilbash Youth Education Public Union. Please, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, I am from Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, disinformation has been disseminating quite quickly in the international digit space. Fake news is the biggest issue. Recently, Azerbaijan became the subject of unfounded claims related to the Palestine. Based on the data that we have, they claim that Azerbaijan openly spoke about Israel, and they claim to quote official sources, but in fact they disinform the public society. We are one of the states that from the first days provided humanitarian aid to the Palestine and supported it in all the platforms. We appeal to the international community. We need to refer to real official sources and to establish mechanisms for the verification. And platforms should be transparent. The content should be marked, especially the content created by AI. It is also important to improve media literacy of the people. The access to reliable information helps us to resolve conflicts and build security. Thank you very much for your information.
Statement. I give now the floor to the delegation of Greece. Dear Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Greece fully aligns itself with the EU statement. I would like to add some comments in my national capacity. Greece has been promoting an ambitious and multifaceted approach to supporting freedom of the media, as Ambassador Bratu concluded in his recent visit. It is promoting a new legislative framework that provides for the abolition of simple defamation so that only slander is now punishable, reducing the risk of abusive lawsuits and slaps. There is a strict preliminary procedure for the admissibility of lawsuits concerning injury to honor and reputation by the press. And new provisions criminalize incitement or encouragement of acts of violence against journalists in sports events. In this regard, let me also add that 2 people were charged in the murder of George Karaivas, and Greek justice has dealt with the case on the level of the Supreme Court. At the same time, in May 2022, a task force was established to coordinate ministries, unions, and experts with the aim of creating a common framework for the protection and safety of journalists. As a result of this work, the International Training Center for the Safety of Journalists and Media Professionals was established in Thessaloniki, and I urge all relevant organizations and agencies to use it. A new academic course on the safety of journalists was introduced in the Department of Journalism in the University of Thessaloniki, and the SLAPS Observatory was created by the Pan-Hellenic Federation of Journalists Unions, aiming at a comprehensive response to abusive lawsuits. Also, the annual Greece-NATO Rapid Deployment Corps seminar on the safety of journalists in conflict zones is being implemented in Thessaloniki, and it's very important that there is training in the military in this field. Finally, the government has focused on the question of media literacy, on the mental health of children, how to confront, which is a very big problem as we discussed earlier, addictive scrolling and addictive algorithms. So phones have been banned in schools for younger children, but also Kids Wallet app was launched where parents can implement effective controls over kids' smartphones so that from a young age we can develop the tools to confront disinformation and to strengthen media literacy. Thank you very much.
And I thank you, dear Ambassador, and now I give the floor to human rights defenders.
Thank you. Professor Dr. Hüseyin Demir, Human Rights Defenders based in Berlin, Germany. Distinguished delegates and colleagues, freedom of expression is the heart of democracy. Yet in today's Turkey, that heartbeat is faint, constricted by fear, criminalization and censorship. Since the state of emergency declared after 2016 coup attempt, the Turkish government has turned its counter-terrorism laws into tools of political persecution. Under these emergency decrees, 170 media outlets were closed, their assets confiscated, and more than 150 journalists imprisoned, many accused of terrorist propaganda for nothing more than a tweet, a headline, or a source they interviewed. Today, Turkey ranks 157th in the World Press Freedom Index, below most conflict zones. Journalists like Ahmet Altan, Ali Ünal, Hidayet Karaca, and countless others have been prosecuted for criticizing the government. Even foreign correspondents are targeted. And pro-government think tanks like SETA publish blacklists of international journalists, exposing them to harassment and violence. The silencing doesn't stop at Turkey's border. Hundreds of Turkish journalists like Cevheri Güven, Abdullah Bozkurt, and Bülent Korucu are in exile and live under digital surveillance and transnational repression. Online news portals such as TR724 or Bold Media and many journalists' social media accounts are blocked in Turkey, while exiled journalists are hunted through Interpol notices and intimidation campaigns. These systematic assaults extend beyond the media. Academics, lawyers, and human rights defenders who voice dissent are dismissed, detained, or banned from travel. Freedom of thought and freedom of academia have become crimes. As our own reports show, over 7,000 academics were expelled, 14 universities were shut down, and many of their passports were revoked, turning them into stateless intellectuals. Freedom of expression in Turkey is not just under attack. It's being criminalized as terrorism. Articles 299 and 301 Penal Code and the terrorist propaganda in the anti-terror law are used to punish opinion itself. As a result, self-censorship becomes a survival strategy. We call upon the OSCE, participating states, and especially the European partners, to demand the release of imprisoned journalists and academics, and ensure that freedom of expression is non-negotiable in any engagement with Turkey. Monitor transnational repression targeting exiled journalists, protect asylum-seeking journalists by preventing political extraditions, and finally, to affirm that truth-telling is not terrorism. At Human Rights Defenders, we believe that defending journalists and free speech is defending democracy itself. Thank you.
Thank you. I give now the floor to Rights and...
Спасибо. Передаю права и свободы туркменских граждан. Вам слово. Thank you very much, Diana Serebrennik. We don't have freedom of press. The state controls the information fully. Any speech not in line with the official statement is persecuted. All TV, radio, print publications are state-owned. Access to foreign media and social networks is heavily restricted. Journalists that are trying to speak the truth face harassment, intimidation. A well-known case of Ms. Sultan Achilova, an independent journalist who actually protested against the high prices of kindergartens, and some other people. The Svoboda Radio formally positioned itself as one of few outlets that are free, but basically they don't talk about human rights. They did not inform about attacks on human rights and about UN committee decisions. They basically discuss everyday issues and forget totally about human rights violations. So they do not cover the real situation in the country and hide the situation from the international community. Also, we are not sure about the position of the head of that service, Mr. Yusufi. He said he did not get the letters from any of us because they were sent to spam box in his outbox due to the security protocol. It seems like he doesn't want to interact with independent journalists. Independent journalists are intimidated. They fear for their close ones. They're being harassed and questioned by the secret services. Any talk about corruption and poverty may lead to being detained and persecuted. The freedom of speech is not a privilege, but the right. And the lack of that right should lead to the reaction of the international community.
Human Rights House Foundation, you have the floor. Sir,
thank you, Chair, and thank you, panelists, and good morning. My name is Dave Elstrad. I'm a representative of the Human Rights House Foundation. We would like to use part of this statement today to provide a platform for our friend and colleague Anar Mammadli. Anar is the co-founder of the Azerbaijani NGO Election Monitoring and Democracy Studies Center, a frequent participant in OSCE human dimension proceedings, and, for the second time in his life, a political prisoner in Azerbaijan. His case is emblematic of the situation facing human rights defenders, including journalists and media workers in Azerbaijan. Anar was arrested in April 2024 after advocacy activities at the OSCE in what can only be described as a direct reprisal for his independent and legitimate election observation efforts and human rights work in Azerbaijan. It's an important reminder that this organization has no mechanism for tracking and reporting on reprisals for engaging with it in the promotion and protection of human rights. And we leave the seat beside me open for him. 2 weeks ago, at the start of his politically motivated trial in Baku, Anar presented an opening statement before the Baku Court of Grave Crimes, challenging the legitimacy of his arrest and the arrest of more than 300 other political prisoners in Azerbaijan, and putting the work of the Azerbaijani authorities to silence dissenting voices under stark review. To quote Anar, who is unable to be here today, "Throughout the past 2 decades, I have contributed to election observation primarily with the support of international organizations. In doing so, I have sought to foster a climate in which Azerbaijani election commission members refrain from interfering in citizens' right to vote and from falsifying the ballots cast. Drawing on my experience in human rights defense, I must note that our country is currently enduring one of the most severe periods of political repression in its history. It should be noted that the practice of presenting the work of human rights defenders and civil society activists as criminal activity first emerged some 20 years ago in authoritarian post-Soviet states such as Russia and Belarus. Since 2013, the Azerbaijani authorities have likewise adopted this practice, criminalizing the work of civil society and human rights defenders in the same way as Russia and Belarus. Indeed, over the last 15 years, every regressive amendment adopted by the Azerbaijani parliament concerning elections, political parties, the media, the legal profession, and the work of both local and international non-governmental organizations has been grounded in the authoritarian precedents set by Russia. This long-standing trend makes it clear that for authoritarian regimes in the post-Soviet space, including Azerbaijan, the Kremlin serves as the political compass for suppressing freedoms and enforcing political repression. This is just a portion of his statement, the entirety of which I'll place on the conference website for delegations. Moderator, in light of this statement from Anar Mammadli, I'd like to ask the panelists two specific questions. What responsibility do OSCE member states have to establish a mechanism to track and report on reprisals against those who engage with human dimension mechanisms, including journalists? And what recommendations do you have to participating states to support independent election monitors and human rights defenders, including journalists, in Azerbaijan? I thank you.
And I thank you. The next in my list is Institute for Reporters' Freedom and Safety, followed by the delegation of Norway. The floor goes to Institute for Reporters' Freedom and Safety, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like to draw attention to the alarming situation of media freedom and freedom of expression in Azerbaijan. The environment for independent journalism has never been more hostile. The authorities have consolidated full control over the media through a single state registry, mandatory licensing, government-issued press card, and limits of foreign ownership. According to data from the Council of Europe Platform for Journalist Safety, Azerbaijan currently holds the highest number of imprisoned journalists in the region. Imagine, 40 media workers. This exceeds figures recorded even in Belarus, with 35 journalists, in Russian Federation with 29 journalists, or even with Turkey with 25 imprisoned journalists. When adjusted for population, Azerbaijan has highest rate of imprisoned journalists in the world. Imagine, for 10 million populations, for a small country, we have 40 media workers, which is currently in the custody. The journalists are arrested on fabricated and politically motivated charges. Many are issued of smuggling cases, a pretext issued to punish those exposing high-level corruptions, human rights abuses, and electoral manipulations. Independent media outlets, notably Abzats Media, Meydan TV, and Toplum TV, have been deliberately targeted through mass arrest and judicial harassment. Among those imprisoned journalists is Hafiz Babale, a respected investigative journalist and editor to run news agency, detained on charges linked to the Abzats Media case. He required urgent medical attention. Another colleague, Alaskar Mammadli, media expert and founder of Toplum TV, also suffers from severe health issues while in detention, and he needs of immediate treatment. Their continued imprisonment posed as a serious risk to their lives and well-being. Journalists in Azerbaijan and even their family members faced not only legal pressure, but also financial punishment. Many have their frozen bank accounts, which is making it extremely difficult for them to cover basic living costs. In recent months, over 10 families of targeted journalists have shared personal stories about losing access to their accounts, leaving them unable to support themselves or pay for everyday needs. Some of the family members have for example, serious issues with travel ban. We call on the Azerbaijani government to release all of detention journalists, repeal restrictive media laws, and intimidation of financial retaliations against the press. We also urge OSCE representative of media freedom to take a firm and proactive stand on the situation of Azerbaijani journalists and to engage directly with the Azerbaijani government to ensure their protection of Azerbaijani journalists and media workers. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor now to the delegation of Norway. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Norway has aligned itself with the statement made by the European Union. However, allow myself to make a few remarks in my national capacity. The full statement can be found online. Freedom of expression and media freedom are fundamental pillars of democratic societies. They are not only legal rights, but essential tools for enabling informed public debate, holding authorities accountable, and safeguarding human dignity. In today's complex information landscape, access to reliable information is increasingly challenged. We witness growing threats to independent journalism, including harassment, intimidation, and politically motivated restrictions. These attacks undermine public trust and weaken democratic institutions. Norway is deeply committed to defending freedom of expression and the rule of law, both at home and within the OSCE region. We continue to support journalists and media workers who face threats and violence for doing their job. Impunity for attacks on journalists must end. Every act of violence that goes uninvestigated and unpunished is an open invitation for further violence. In response to these challenges, the Norwegian government has recently launched two key initiatives. The National Strategy to Strengthen Resilience Against Disinformation, presented by the Ministry of Culture and Equality, outlines a comprehensive approach to research-based policy development. It also addresses how to counter harmful information flows and addresses emerging threats such as deepfake and AI-generated content, and calls for coordinated efforts across sectors to protect public trust and democratic discourse. The National Strategy for Freedom of Expression, launched last month, sets out a framework for ensuring that freedom of expression is not only protected in law, but realized in practice. The strategy focuses on infrastructure, inclusion, transparency, and the fight against harmful and distorted speech. It recognizes that democratic resilience requires long-term investment in education, civil society, and safe conditions for public debate. Within the OSCE, Norway remains a strong advocate for media freedom and the safety of journalists. We fully support the mandate and work of the representative on freedom of the media and emphasize the importance of preserving the autonomy of the office. We call on all participating states to take the necessary steps to implement their OSCE commitments in this area. Media freedom and journalist safety are cornerstones of our common security. Let us work together to build societies where truth can thrive and where public discourse is open, inclusive, and informed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the delegation of Switzerland. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Anne-Catherine Stolz from the Swiss mission to the OSCE. The safety of media professionals is under threat around the world, including in participating states. And the gap between our shared commitments and the reality on the ground is widening. If journalists cannot work freely, the right to freedom of expression is denied to each of us. Democracy is weakened, and societies are deprived of essential access to information. In conflict settings, we increasingly witness the deliberate targeting of media professionals, which constitutes a war crime under international humanitarian law. We recall that the deliberate targeting of media professionals sets a dangerous precedent in a climate already marked by impunity. Let me share 3 observations on how to work towards closing this gap, based on our own expertise. First, on national implementation. In 2023, Switzerland launched its first national action plan on the safety of media professionals, addressing threats against journalists in both physical and online spaces. The plan raises awareness among politicians and in society of the challenges facing journalists and highlights the fundamental importance of the media for an effective Swiss democracy. It contains concrete measures, such as regular roundtables between journalists and the police to share best practices for cooperation, and a website providing journalists with actionable information on how to deal with threats and violence. Second, on supporting policy guidance. Switzerland has supported the OSCE representative on freedom of the media in assisting participating states with the implementation of Ministerial Council Decision 318. We have placed particular emphasis on strengthening the protection of female journalists facing online harassment and on developing approaches to safeguard freedom of expression and media freedom as the use of artificial intelligence increasingly shapes information ecosystems. Third, on leveraging coalitions. As a member of both the Media Freedom Coalition and the Freedom Online Coalition, Switzerland promotes coordinated international action between states with the support and input of civil society. These global coalitions have proven effective in advocating for individual journalists under threat, raising awareness of systemic restrictions and holding accountable those who endanger media professionals or prevent them from carrying out their essential work. Where journalists are silenced, democracy is diminished. As incoming OSCE chair and based on our long-term priorities on freedom of expression, media independence, and the protection of journalists, Switzerland will continue to turn commitments into action. I thank you.
And I thank you for your statement. The next in the list is Political Opposition Movement, Erkin, Uzbekistan. You have the floor.
Thank you, dear ladies and gentlemen. Arsem Brukhanov, the political opposition movement, Erkin, Uzbekistan. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to the Uzbekistan delegation, which has managed to bring a considerable number of delegation with together. So the more they mention us, the more supporters number increases. So it's a good tendency, I would like to say. The speaker's statements made me introduce corrections in the report I have previously prepared. I would like to react to some statements in the context of today's topic. I would like to express my opinion. With regard to the decrease of funding previously donated by the Radio Freedom, Voice of America, by the U.S. government. Actually, the thing is that they have not fulfilled their task they actually were supposed to. At the moment, due to its inefficiency or the lack of expertise in the Central Asian region, the information war was lost. And the Western world usually has reached a kind of the peak of knowing less than probably it should. While speaking about the Western offices of censorship topics, they do not extend upon these, let's say, forbidden topics. And this task is usually given to them by the Uzbek authorities. For example, speaking about the president's relatives, about immediate relatives, etc. We have repeatedly tried to get in contact with the Radio Freedom to give us the floor, the platform to express our opinion. We weren't entitled this opportunity. And moreover, for example, and the radio itself uses our logo without even mentioning our name. I can recall a couple of events that took place in Uzbekistan, which wasn't voiced in mass media. The first, the the General Rahman was arrested. He was charged with the U.S. spying interpretation. No mass media resource mentioned it about the Uzbekistan. For example, in March this year, 60 people with disabilities decided to organize their event. They actually participated in the election. You can imagine 25 policemen were sent to control, to monitor the process. And for example, the blogger Aziz Kahimov, an individual, it was actually a guy who on mass media platform shared the information he has found. What I recommend the Central Asian office just to read again the Code of Ethics and stop telling lies.
I now give the floor to the delegation of Ukraine. Sir, you have the floor. Madam, I don't see it. Madam, please.
Distinguished audience, Nelly Hrenation, mission of the President of Ukraine in Crimea. Since Russia's occupation of Crimea in 2014, the peninsula has turned into a territory where independent journalism equals risk. Objective reporting on events can come at the cost of freedom or even life. Just last week, as was mentioned, French journalist Anthony Lalican was killed by a Russian drone strike in the Donetsk region while documenting the consequences of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Ukrainian journalist was injured in the same attack. 113 journalists have been killed since the beginning of Russia's aggression. Russia has effectively destroyed freedom of speech and peaceful assembly in occupied Crimea. Ukrainian media outlets have been shut down, independent journalists and civil activists are persecuted, and any dissent is suppressed through repression. The occupiers block the signals of Ukrainian broadcasters, block access to independent news sources, control service providers. For reporting truthful information in occupied Crimea, you, as a journalist, may face persecution or be declared a foreign agent. You may also be subjected to torture or imprisoned, as in the case of 17 Crimean journalists currently held in Russia prisons. Additionally, for expressing your opinion or posting on social media about the real situation in Crimea, you may be accused of so-called discrediting the Russian armed forces and face administrative charges. There was an instance when the occupiers imposed an administrative fine on a woman because her child liked a pro-Ukrainian symbol on social media. There are the tactics Russia uses to suppress freedom. The occupation practices it first tested in Crimea now threaten global security. No country in the world is fully protected from them today. We welcome the recent adoption of the resolution by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which calls for increased pressure on the Russian Federation to release Ukrainian journalists held in Russia captivity. The resolution pays special attention to the term citizen journalist, especially those from occupied Crimea who risk their lives daily to report on the crimes of the occupation. Ukrainian journalists in occupied territories find themselves as representatives on civil resistance. They know they risk their freedom but continue to fight. And all of us must fight for journalists' rights and their safety. Thank you so much.
And I thank you. Now I give the floor to NGO Central Asia Progress and Integration Forum.
Dear conference participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm representing NGO Central Asian Forum of Progress and Integration. Taking the floor, I would like to draw your attention to the matters regarding the citizens' rights to information, freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Uzbekistan is often subject to allegations that draw instances of intolerance towards freedom of speech and criticism, accusations against journalists and bloggers, fines, arrests and censorship. However, we representatives of civil society institutions cannot fully agree with such opinion for the following systematic reasons. Today, about 4,000 media outlets are operating in Uzbekistan, from which more than 65% are non-governmental. A distinctive feature of the development of media and pluralism in the country is that national NGOs publish independent media outlets. More than 10 magazines, more than 20 newspapers, and approximately 10 television and radio channels. In addition, a number of foreign television and radio channels broadcast in the country, including Reuters, Economics, Sky News, France Press, Euronews, BBC, CNN, Fox News, Al Jazeera, and other news agencies. This indicates that the national press has undergone significant structural and qualitative changes. Particularly noteworthy is the fact that the media has recently been analyzing positive changes in the country's life. A healthy, critical spirit has been strengthening, contributing to effectiveness of reforms, strengthening public oversight and civic engagement. As a result, there has been an increase in the number of materials critical of officials. The numbers of analytical articles published online increased to 86%. But it should be noted that the current situation in all member states shows that the independent non-governmental media, mainly independent bloggers and media activists, are forced to suspend their activities due to financial difficulties. Lack of funds is forcing them to work for private interests. Therefore, our organization calls for the announcement of programs to support free journalism within OSCE and the development of specific recommendations on the ethics of journalists. One more issue, we observe that when courts issue legal sentences for the truly illegal or unethical behavior of individual journalists and bloggers, the court decisions should not be interpreted as restriction to freedom of speech or pressure on journalists. This politicization of the issues is out of reach with the real situation and arguments put forward by the public. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I give now the floor to Barkaror Oyat.
Yeah. Thank you so much, distinguished moderator. My name is Dr. Serikbek Muratayev. I am a coordinator of NGO Barkaror Hayat from Uzbekistan. And the conference participants, ladies and gentlemen, taking this opportunity, I would like to draw your attention to the role of the media in Uzbekistan and the reforms being implemented to ensure freedom of expression in the country. Freedom of expression is a fundamental and natural human right and a vital foundation of democratic society. Significant positive changes in this area are currently underway in Uzbekistan. In recent years, real conditions have been created for the development of free and independent media. New laws have been adopted that strengthen legal protections for journalists and bloggers, expand access to information, and increase transparency in government activities. Today, approximately more than 4,000 media outlets operate in the country, including private, regional, and online publications, where socially important issues are freely discussed. In this context, new regional media outlets are being created in Karakalpakstan as well. Young journalists are being supported, media literacy training is being conducted, and going public feedback is being established through online platforms and public discussions. These measures are aimed at achieving the most important goal, ensuring that every citizen, regardless of a region, can freely express their thoughts and participate in the life of multinational country. Dear conference participants, freedom of speech is not just a right, but above all, it's a responsibility. For a journalist, responsibility means being honest. For a state, it means determining legal policy and ensuring legal order. And for society, responsibility means respecting different points of view. Today, Uzbekistan is firmly on the path of openness, ensuring legal guarantees and developing free media. In this context, I would like to pause and comment on Mr. Khoshkarbay Turemuratov's arguments yesterday, who noted that Karakalpakstan allegedly lacks its own political parties, which is not true, dear ladies and gentlemen. First, according to the Constitution of the Republic of Uzbekistan, all political parties have equal rights and opportunities to operate throughout the country, including the Karakalpakstan. Second, all major parties, such as the Liberal Democratic Party and many others, they have their branches in all regions, including Karakalpakstan. They participate in election form deputy groups in the parliament of Karakalpakstan. Moreover, most importantly, the same constitutional guarantees is freedom of association, opinion, and electoral participation apply in Karakalpakstan as throughout Uzbekistan. That's why I call on Karakalpak activists not to criticize from the sidelines, but to return to their homeland and help build a prosperous future for our children by working in various areas of society, beneficial activities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I would like to recall all to remain focused on the topic of this session, which is freedom of expression and safety of journalists. I now give the floor to Human Rights Promotion Center Public Union.
Nazrin Aliyeva, founder and deputy chairman of Human Rights Promotion Center in the Republic of Azerbaijan. Right to expression is regulated in most international documents within the framework of freedom of expression. In this regard, the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights and 1966 International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights can be cited as examples. Freedom of expression is closely related to freedom of media. This follows from the fact that in most cases, expression of opinion is carried out through the media. Freedom of expression and media are also recognized as one of the fundamental rights in the legislation of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Thus, Article 47 of the Constitution guarantees freedom of expression and protects the right of everyone to freely express their opinion. In addition, we can note that the law on the media of the Republic of Azerbaijan determines the legal foundations of media freedom and takes the principles of transparency and pluralism as a basis in the activities of the media. At the same time, freedom of expression may be subject to legal restrictions in some cases. Such restrictions are applied in order to prevent hate speech. This principle is reflected in both international law and national legislation. Relevant articles of the law on the media, the promotion of hatred and hostility based on racial, religious, national, and other discrimination is considered inadmissible, and if such cases are allowed, legal measures can be taken against media entities. Allegations by certain Armenian representatives are unsubstantiated. It's completely false, especially when they come from media outlets and organizations that for decades were instrumentalized and actively involved in creating and spreading distorted narratives to justify the occupation of Azerbaijani territories and the ethnic cleansing of Azerbaijanis from both Armenia and the formerly occupied territories of Azerbaijan. I thank you for your attention.
And I thank you, Madam. The next in the list is Foundation for Intercultural Integration, and I apologize for using the English, but I didn't want to kill your own national language. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear moderator, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Muhammad John Kabirov. I am a journalist in exile from Tajikistan and editor-in-chief of Azda TV, which also exile media. This year's mark 10 years since my first participation at this conference back in 2015. Then the situation in Tajikistan, freedom of speech situation in Tajikistan was deteriorated. The majority of media were shut down, including Najat newspaper, Azadagan, and Niga, and today the Radio Free Europe also at the crisis of the closure in Tajikistan. And the only remaining media, which are exile media, and also exile media face crisis, lack of funding, and the entire society in Tajikistan are under the full propaganda of Russian media. Therefore, you see a lot of recruitment from Tajikistan. According to Ukraine authority, more than 1,000 Tajik citizens were captured in Ukraine fighting for Russia. So this is the proof of how Russian propaganda have huge impact in Central Asian society, especially in Tajikistan. So just remind you, 10 years ago when I participated in this conference, there were only 2 imprisoned journalists in Tajikistan. But unfortunately, this year, we have more than 10 journalists imprisoned back in Tajikistan, according to the Reporters Without Borders and CPG. But the real number is far more because they have specific standards. According to my investigation, there are more than 20 journalists and bloggers and writers back imprisoned in Tajikistan. So the indifference of the Western state and European countries give the government of Tajikistan bravery to suppress freedom of speech, to imprison the journalists. And now I call the name of imprisoned journalists. Hikmatullah Saifullah was imprisoned to 16 years, Abdul Qahari Dawlat to 20 years. And recently in 2022, after the following protests in Badakhshan, Abdullah Gurbati sentenced to 7 years, Daleri Umali 10 years, Abdusator Pir Muhammad Zoda and Zawqibek Sayyid Amuni 7 years, Khurshid Jumayev 8 years, Ulfat Khanum Mamad Shoiva. She spent her entire career working for media freedom and as a journalist. She was sentenced for 21 years. She's an old woman and she's just forgotten. And also Khurshid Fazil of 7 years. Recently in 2024, 2025, Ahmad Ibrahim, the editor of Pike newspaper, sentenced to 10 years. And lastly, in February 2025, this year, Rukhshana Hakimova, she sentenced to 8 years for just carrying her own duty. Rukhshana Hakimova, she had a breastfeeding baby, and she was taken to this
Please, if you can conclude. Can you turn on the microphone?
Okay. I just encourage the state delegates to use leverage and diplomatic connection to force Tajik government to release at least the 2 women imprisoned journalists, Ulfat Khan Mamashoeva and Rukhshana Hakimova. I also encourage the women diplomats and delegates to show solidarity and toward these women to secure their freedom. In the past years, because of the international pressure, Tajik government also released Khairullah Mirsaidov, which was sentenced to...
Thank you. We appreciate it. The next in the list is the delegation of the Czech Republic. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, your Ambassador Gascone, for giving us the floor. Czechia aligns itself with the EU statement, and in addition, let me make a few remarks in my national capacity. Freedom of expression and media are essential for democratic governance and accountability. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine highlights the critical role of independent journalism in informing public response. We are deeply concerned by rising threats to media freedom, including attacks on journalists, disinformation, and misuse of digital tools. Russian propaganda spreads globally online, polarizing societies and undermining democracies. To counter this, we support independent public broadcasting, media literacy, and public trust. Czechia addressed these challenges in the UN resolution on human rights in the digital age, which underlines the importance of encryption and anonymity for journalists. We advocate for a free, open and secure internet that respects human rights and enables media freedom. Czechia also supports exiled journalists and civil society activists from abroad through fast-track visas and a long-term residence program. Hundreds have found safety in Czechia so far. Moreover, our country allocates over €1 million to support independent media and media literacy, alongside voluntary contributions to international organizations like the Global Media Defense Fund and the OSCE Representative on Freedom of the Media. Our efforts rely on strong partnerships with NGOs built on trust and long-term cooperation, which we consider as a key to sustainable democratic transition. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much. Next in the list is Set My People Free, followed by the delegation of Malta. The floor goes to Set My People Free.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, dear colleagues, excellencies. Set My People Free works to repeal Islam. My name is Hulda Fahmy, and I'm with Set My People Free, working to repeal Islamic anti-apostasy and anti-blasphemy laws, which affect the freedom of conscience and religion and belief of over 1.3 billion people. 11 countries sanctioned the death penalty for apostasy or blasphemy, leaving or questioning Islam, and over 20 countries criminalize expressions of non-belief or questioning Islamic laws. We would like to reiterate our support for the decision number 318, and I thank the speakers for reiterating that freedom of expression includes the freedom to hold opinions and to receive and impart information and ideas without interference by public authority and regardless of frontier. We are concerned by laws which risk doing this. One, the Digital Service Act and Digital Markets Act in the EU, which goal is to restrict hate speech, but the terms are quite vague, and I want to know how is the EU ensuring that the DSA is not weaponized as a de facto anti-blasphemy law. I also am thankful that the decision also recognizes that in addition to attacks and threats against journalists, like the individual journalist, it also has an impact on journalists' activities, that it can have a self-censorship effect and also discourage journalists to report on certain issues. And so I'm wondering how can OSCE states be a bulwark for to address also the issues that happen afterwards, the chilling effect that these arbitrary detentions and also threats online can have. The second part of Article 19, it says that it can be limited. Freedom of expression can be subject to certain restrictions, but only such as provided by law and are necessary. In December 2023, Denmark voted through a law in the Danish Penal Code, subsection 2, Article 110E, which criminalizes inappropriate treatment of a text that has a significant religious importance to a recognized religious community or an object that appears to be such a text. There are several human rights groups, including Set My People Free, who are concerned about this law, as it is, in fact, a de facto anti-blasphemy law. And as we asked in the last session here, did Denmark consult with civil society before passing this law? And specifically, did they meet with ex-Muslim associations before they did? What checks and balances did you go through? In August 2024, Christian Bjørnskov, professor in now I lost the university name, but he showed that there is no connection between that introducing anti-blasphemy laws is a bulwark against terrorism, which was the reason Denmark introduced this law, was for security reasons. And also the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, which is an independent bipartisan US federal government body, also raised concerns with this law. We're going to discuss this further in our side event on the 16th of October, where Kola Alapini, an international human rights lawyer, will also be discussing from the context of Nigeria how these laws do not create a peaceful and stable society. And I would recommend you to read our recommendations and also support journalism which addresses these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, and just would like to recall that rights of reply will be submitted in written and distributed on the online platform of the conference. And I'll give the floor to the delegation of Malta. Dear Deborah, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador, dear Andrea. While fully aligning with the EU statement, I would like to deliver the following remarks in a national capacity. Malta remains deeply concerned by the escalating threats faced by journalists across the OSCE region. Threats intensified by ongoing crises, including Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Repression and silencing of journalists are not isolated incidents, they are systematic assaults on democratic values. We honor the courage of those who continue to report the truth despite harassment, intimidation, violence, or unjust detention. These attacks are not not only endanger individuals, they erode the public's access to free and reliable information. No country is perfect, and no society is immune to threats to media freedom. Malta knows this firsthand. The assassination of investigative journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia in 2017 was a national tragedy, and a stark reminder that threats to journalists are threats to democracy itself. Delivering full justice remains a top priority. The 3 hitmen have been sentenced and the mastermind has been charged, awaiting trial. This painful chapter has deepened our resolve. We are committed to strengthening democratic resilience by countering disinformation, advancing media and digital literacy, and ensuring journalist safety, especially for women who face distinct risks in their work. As current presidency of the Council of Europe, Malta hosted a high-level conference last month on strengthening democratic resilience to disinformation. Together with our partners, and including the RFOM, we explored rights-based strategies to empower citizens and protect the integrity of our information society, as well as the importance of a multi-stakeholder approach in addressing disinformation involving different sectors, including governments, parliamentarians, independent regulatory authorities, private sector, academia, and civil society, among others. Domestically, we have in the past months launched a new Freedom of Information portal. This new digital system is accessible to both internal and external users and will streamline requests and improve communication between applicants and public officers, making transparency more accessible. We have learned that meaningful change requires open, honest, and proactive collaboration with international partners. Finally, allow me to underline that the mandate of the RFOM remains profoundly fundamental. RFOM's guidance in fostering a safer environment for journalists and strengthening our legislative and institutional frameworks is invaluable. We are grateful for RFOM's constant support, and we look forward to continue this fructuous collaboration together. I thank you.
And I thank the delegation of Malta for the statement, and I give the floor now to Reformist Youth Public Union.
Большое спасибо. Меня зовут Фарид Шахбазлы. Я председатель общественной...
Good afternoon. I'm the representative of the Azerbaijan Revolutionary Youth Movement. Besides, I'm the chief editor of the editorial, the local editorial. For us, of course, the freedom of speech and freedom of media remains the relevant issues. Azerbaijan, in this sphere, has a quite considerable experience to deal with the various challenges. Actually, at the moment, this sphere is undergoing serious transformations. We have worked upon the legislation procedures with the transparency procedures of doing professional business, plus the development of digitalization. And for us, the journalist activities have often been of the primary interest. But unfortunately, in the sequence of war conflicts, the journalists have been put at risk. It identifies how fragile this profession is and how people should be protected. After the Azerbaijan conflict was over, journalists, of course, were able to continue their professional activities, and many organizations are involved in demining. Meanwhile, our country is sometimes being attacked by misinformation campaigns. It means that it's the main task of the mass media sector to be able to provide the protective shield from the misinformation. It's not only in the national interest, but I guess it is also in the international interest as well. I thank you for attention.
Thank you. And the next in my list is Amnesty International.
Mr. Moderator, distinguished delegates, my name is Oleg Kozlovsky and I speak on behalf of Amnesty International to raise urgent concerns about the assault on media freedom in Azerbaijan, intensified during and after the COP29 meeting last year, and to urge an international response. At least 29 media workers are now behind bars on politically motivated charges, and no independent media are left inside the country. Under the 2022 media law, amended further last July, the government can arbitrarily deny registration to media outlets and terminate or block those not on its registry. Writing about corruption, environment, or human rights has routinely resulted in journalists facing prosecution on fabricated charges of economic and other crimes under false or questionable evidence. Maidan TV, Toplum TV, Canal 13, Abzas Media, and Radio Free Europe are among the latest outlets targeted by the government. Sevinch Vagivgizi, Ulvi Hasanli, Hafiz Babali, Nargis Absalamova, Elnara Gasimova, Muhammad Kekalov, and Farid Miralizadeh were sentenced on 20th of June to up to 9 years imprisonment. Conditions in detention are dire, often amounting to cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment. Torture and other ill treatment, sexualized threats against women journalists, denial of access to clean water and sanitation, denial of necessary health care and of access to legal counsels are commonplace. Those reporting or complaining about the conditions often face reprisals. Azerbaijan must immediately and unconditionally release all journalists and others detained or imprisoned under unfounded politically motivated charges in retaliation for their criticism of the authorities. Immediately ensure that no one is subjected to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, and every person in custody is provided with the health care they require. Effectively investigate all allegations of torture and other ill treatment and of fabrication of evidence and unfounded prosecution, and bring all those suspected of being responsible for these human rights violations to justice in fair trial proceedings. End all reprisals against dissenting voices and stop immediately the clampdown on civil society and independent media. We also urge the international community to provide effective monitoring and reporting on human rights violations in Azerbaijan, including trial monitoring, to report its findings and to raise specific cases and human rights concerns in bilateral and multilateral fora, to provide protection pathways for independent journalists and their families and other at-risk persons, and to mainstream human rights considerations in all diplomatic, economic, and other communications and cooperation initiatives involving Azerbaijan. Independent journalism is indeed not a crime. We ask you to stand with Azerbaijan's journalists. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the delegation of the Netherlands. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Netherlands aligns itself with the EU statement, and please allow me to add some remarks in my national capacity. The Netherlands pays tribute to those human rights defenders, artists, civil society organizations, journalists and media workers who use their voices to defend human rights and face legal, financial, digital, physical, and psychological threats for doing so. And a number of you are in the room here today, and you work tirelessly to make our world a freer, safer, and more just place. It's all of you that hold power to account and report on issues that are important to us all, with increasingly higher risks to your own health and safety and that of friends and family. Freedom of expression is one of the fundamental freedoms and a crucial pillar for thriving societies. When all voices, including the most critical, are heard, injustice can be challenged, positive change can be demanded, and all other freedoms can be defended. It's precisely for this reason that we must speak out on behalf of those who cannot do so themselves. This is not just a moral imperative, but an urgent societal necessity. This past year has been the deadliest year on record for journalists worldwide. Far too many have been targeted simply for doing their job. When journalists are silenced through violence and repression, societies are deprived of their right to information, and the consequences are borne by all. Protecting journalists is therefore not only about safeguarding lives, but also about defending democracy, information integrity, and transparency. And that's why it remains a top priority in our human rights policy. In a world where information flows increasingly online, ensuring safety and protecting freedom of expression also in the digital world is our priority as well. The rapid spread of disinformation presents a huge challenge that no country or organization can address successfully alone. Disinformation campaigns, often instruments by autocratic governments that seek to challenge our democracies, are detrimental and have a polarizing and destabilizing effect in the OSCE region and beyond. Let's work together in facing this challenge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for your statement. And the next one is Institute for Human Rights. No, sorry, my mistake. Actually, the next one is Union of Informed Citizens. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Daniel Ioannisyan. It is perhaps not unknown to anyone in this hall that anti-democratic propaganda and media manipulations are becoming a serious challenge in almost all OSCE member states. Armenia is not an exception in this regard, where some local forces in cooperation with Russia are trying to devaluate the idea of democracy in every possible way. Given the low level of media literacy and shortage of independent media, those forces succeed to achieving a certain result, however, fortunately, so far to a very limited degree. The shortage of independent media also leads to another issue. Large segments of society no longer value the media and are sometimes even hostile to all journalists, including those that generate independent and quality content. At the same time, we observe a significant rise of foreign information manipulations and interference in Armenia. We observe that number of troll factories, including one controlled by the Wagner military group, are being engaged in Armenia while operating from Russia. We can see new tools, new methods, new actors engaging in hybrid attacks on Armenia, where information operations are a key component. Regarding narratives, they are trying to undermine democracy as a value, targeting democratic reforms, presenting Armenia's relations with US and the EU as a source of threats and many problems, targeting Armenia's path of gaining independence from Russia, and of course they're trying to undermine peace and possibility of peace with Azerbaijan. The last one, by the way, is very active narrative recently, because as you know, Russia, the main tool of Russia's leverage on Armenia and Azerbaijan is the conflict. At the same time, the Armenian government is failing with establishing functional and efficient public communication, as well as creating a good environment for independent media and media financial transparency. At the end, because some Azerbaijani colleagues have mentioned terrible stories of journalists being victims of armed conflicts, I would like to suggest a comprehensive or even an international investigation of targeting a group of journalists in the city of Martun in October 1st, 2020. Let me remind you that the full package of 40 Grad multiple rocket system shells hit a group of international journalists in the center of civilian city where no military infrastructure was within a radius of several kilometers. I think that transparent investigation of that incident could be a good tool for confidence building in our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now it's the turn for Institute for Human Rights. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to draw the attention of the distinguished delegations to the alarming retaliation against female journalists in Azerbaijan. What we are witnessing is not isolated persecution, but a systematic and deliberate campaign to silence independent voices. More than 40 journalists remain behind bars, making Azerbaijan one of the most aggressive jailers of media professionals in the OSCE region. Among them, there are 9 courageous women targeted solely for their integrity, professionalism, and commitment to truth. Ainur Elgunesh, a journalist of Meydan TV, is known for her critical reporting and now faces fabricated charges of illegal entrepreneurship and currency smuggling. Her colleagues, Aysel Umudova and Aytash Taptykh, face identical accusations of money laundering and unlawful business activity, offenses carrying sentences up to 7 years. Fatima Mavlamvli, a freelance reporter, and Hayala Agayeva might face the same plight. From Abzaz Media, Elnara Gasimova, Nargis Absalamova, and Sevinch Vagivgizi are prosecuted on comparable grounds. Moreover, the 3 female journalists were transferred to a remote penal colony 250 kilometers from Baku without prior notice to their families, which is an intentional attempt to isolate and intimidate them. Finally, Ulviya Ali, an independent journalist, was arrested in May 2025 on false smuggling charges. During detention, she was denied legal counsel, subjected to physical abuse, and threatened with sexual violence. Their arrest followed investigations into government corruption and human rights violations. The charges of smuggling, money laundering, illegal entrepreneurship, and tax evasion are universally recognized as fabricated and politically motivated. The female journalists face not only the same repressive tactics as their male counterparts, but also gender-specific abuses while in detention. Reports indicate they are denied access to basic hygiene products, essential medications, and adequate medical care. All of this occurs against the backdrop of widespread imprisonment and a forced tendency toward exile. While in exile, journalists are left with little to no support, lacking both financial and institutional resources to rebuild their lives and, most importantly, to continue their work. Taken together, these patterns reveal not isolated incidents, but a deliberate strategy to silence independent voices and dismantle the space for free expression. We would like to extend our invitation to tomorrow's event on protection of journalists and human rights defenders' digital rights while countering surveillance in the South Caucasus and Central Asia, which will happen at 8:30 a.m. in the Opera Room, where we'll delve into further details of numerous violations to the freedom of expression in the region. Therefore, we call on the OSCE member states to closely monitor the situation of media freedom in Azerbaijan and increase their support and solidarity for affected journalists and those resorted to exile. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The next in the list is the delegation of Kazakhstan. Sir, you have the floor.
Уважаемые участники конференции, последние 2
Distinguished conference participants, during the last years, wide-scale work has been taking place to improve dialogue of state and the society and participants of the market. The new laws have been adopted on mass media and on economical activities based on the European Digital Services Act, and as of today, it is one of the most progressive in the whole post-Soviet space. It conforms with the international standards and human rights standards. It provides a balance of the access of the people to information, freedom of journalism. When preparing the draft law, international documents have been thoroughly studied. It conforms with the constitution of the Kazakhstan of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan ratified international documents and integrated them into the legislation system of the country. Mass media legislation conforms with the international recommendations, provides rights for journalists to access to information, introduces provides rights of children, provides protection of personal data. Journalists have guarantees for their professional activities, protection from pressure, and professional independence. In the framework of this legislation, the term of expectation for responses to journalist requests have been shortened. Also, limited situations posing threats to journalists. This legislation provides for constitutional guarantees, and international standards provides free access to information for citizens, protection for journalists, and protection of public interest. Thank you very much for your attention.
Next in the list is Mouvement Démocratique National Choix Démocratique du Turkménistan. You have the floor.
Благодарю вас. Меня зовут Мурат Курбан.
Hello, my name is Malp Kurbanov, and I represent the movement of Turkmenistan. Today, I would like to briefly state about the critical state of things in Turkmenistan, about something that we should immediately do in order to improve the situation. It's the total control of the censorship and horror. There is no freedom, there is no free media outlets. They are completely under the control of the country, and the function is the ruling outlet of the propaganda, and every outlet is supposed to work under the deliberate targeting. Many networks and services are being blocked, and the users usually suspend and actually. Why? In order to read the propaganda. In 2023, the employers are supposed to write the guarantee, sign the guarantee to be able to treat with safety the documents of the authoritarian party. Without actually the access to the information, the citizens cannot take a rational choice because they are deprived of the actual information. They're deprived of the real database, and even individuals who provide accurate information are constantly under the risk of being charged and, of course, put in jail. The example can serve as, for example, the stealing of blogger Alishel Sakhatov and Leo Husov after being released from the center. They were transferred to another country, and they are currently executed, and they are under tortures. So no information is available. I challenge and call on all officers of OC to address the Turkmenistan authorities department responsible for providing these regulations to meet these people and to see in your own eyes what's going on and how they are treated. For the second day in the row, the Turkmenistan delegation is not present. Why? Because we're speaking about freedom of speech, freedom of media. We call on seizing persecution and putting charge on innocent journalists. We are for the free exchange of information and give support to the independent media that are working in Turkmenistan as credible and resourceful outlets, and to call on the Committee of the European Union and of the OSCE to systematically be held accountable for the violation of human rights. We call the all civilized world to pay attention to the situation in Turkmenistan and not to let it become the prison without the right for free word.
Give now the floor to Freedom for Eurasia.
My name is Leila Seyedbek. I represent NGO Freedom for Eurasia. Distinguished delegates, colleagues, and friends, Karakalpakstan is a sovereign republic within Uzbekistan and home to around 2 million people. Has become a stark example of the collapse of free expression. Although Uzbekistan and Karakalpakstan's constitution guarantees sovereignty and even the right to secede, in practice, Karakalpaks are prohibited from even talking about it. Since the 2022 protests in Nukus, when Uzbek authorities sought to strip Karakalpakstan of its right to self-determination and remove secession right from the constitution, the region has faced relentless repression. Journalists, activists, and citizens are persecuted for peaceful expression. Independent outlets have been shut down, and anyone questioning official narratives or even dreaming about freedom is branded a separatist or extremist. Daulet Murat Tajimuratov, a lawyer, journalist, and human rights defender who peacefully advocated for Karakalpakstan's constitutional rights, for defending the law itself, was sentenced in 2023 to 16 years in prison after an unfair trial. His case shows how Uzbekistan criminalizes peaceful expression turning legitimate constitutional advocacy into a crime against the state. Repression now reaches beyond Uzbekistan's borders. Exiled activist Akılbek Muratbay, sentenced in absentia in Uzbekistan for sharing materials from this very OSCE conference and organizing a symbolic online act of remembrance, asking people to turn off their lights for 16 minutes in solidarity with Tajimuratov. Inside Uzbekistan, Mustafa Tursunbayev, founder of Nukus online YouTube channel, died in custody in February 2025 after being sentenced on fabricated charges. In 2024, 2 bloggers were arrested simply for asking why street signs in Nukus excluded Karakalpak language. Today, a single online comment or a like can lead to arrest in Karakalpakstan. In 2025, Rinat Utambetov was extradited from Kazakhstan and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for sharing Nukus protest videos in a private chat of 10 classmates. And these are only a few examples. Beyond the region, activist families are harassed and smear campaigns target Karakalpaks abroad. Meanwhile, Gongos appear at a conference like this, portraying a false image of reform while genuine civil society is silenced. Last year, during a side event on Karakalpakstan organized by Freedom for Eurasia, members of the Uzbek delegation demanded the removal of a verified participant and later shared flyers with her photo and personal data, a clear act of intimidation. Distinguished delegates, Karakalpakstan is not a local issue. It is a test of our shared human rights commitments. When journalists, bloggers, and defenders are silenced or exiled and state proxies speak in their place, we cannot remain indifferent. It is our collective duty to ensure that their struggle for truth and dignity is not lost in silence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. Next in the list is the delegation of France. Cher André, à vous.
Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, representatives of civil society, France fully subscribes to the EU statement. I will add a few words in my national capacity. On October 3rd, French photojournalist Anthony Lalican was killed in Ukraine while exercising his work to inform on the horrors of the war. France pays tribute to his courage, which honors his profession. A legal investigation has been opened in France for war crimes regarding his death. At least 14 journalists have been killed in Ukraine since the beginning of the war, and more than 200 in Gaza these last 2 years. France reiterates its commitment to the freedom of the media, freedom of expression, and the essential protection of journalists. We pay tribute to the women and men who risk their lives for plural and free information essential to our democracy. Journalists in exile conduct an essential and courageous work to inform despite censorship and intimidation from the country of origin. Journalists must be protected everywhere, under all circumstances. It is our responsibility as states and conform to our OSCE commitments. Thank you.
Merci à la France. The next speaker in my list is Euro-Asian Expert Council Foundation. You have the floor.
Приветствую всех собравшихся.
Good afternoon, everyone. Distinguished guests and participants. I would like to pay attention that in due time the UN previously was targeted at the principles that actually the freedom of speech is not determined by some individual countries. It means that, for example, it's kind of the strategy that has led to the violation of human rights. And OSCE actually bases its activity on preventive measures. All participants are engaged in preventive measures on human rights. It's difficult to say anything, taking into consideration that in a number of countries, journalists are being persecuted, are being harassed, and in the different regions of the world, the rights, the freedom of expression and freedom of media is violated. I would like to say that there are some reasons, some, I would say, themes that are not publicized and are not somehow dealt into in practical aspect. Probably they are out of the scope. I'm in the Central Asia region. And we can observe, for example, the similar situation in Russia Federation. If in due time, for example, when there was remarked a change with the freedom of expression, nowadays the situation would be completely different. So there is, for example, the Central Asian region with numerous cases, but quite alarming. And for example, if, for example, now OSCE undertakes some radical measures in order to prevent violation of human rights, then probably it would be unnecessary, or there would be no need for every regional representative to have a word here. So I would like to pay attention to the fact that taking into consideration the risk of, for example, criminal percentage, and we have sometimes leave behind the ecological disaster. And let's take my region. For example, in my region, due to industrial and mining practices, for example, the environment is under serious threat. And for example, if the situation deteriorates, I guess that this situation might influence on the whole Eurasian region. And so, for example, people do not mention it in their report. Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Да, и вот последнее, да, вот.
Yes, and I would like to round up some attempts of individual journalists to raise ecological issues for discussion are completely ignored or not accepted. And you can even observe that in mass media, in our mass media, ecological issues are not raised because it does not line in with the economic development. Pay attention to this, please. Thank you.
You can always submit in written so that everybody has the full text. Now the next in the list is the delegation of Turkey. Madam, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Media freedom is an essential pillar of democracy and is indispensable in ensuring transparency, accountability, and the free flow of information for an informed society. Journalists also play a vital role in informing the international community about the situation on the ground in times of crisis and conflict, about humanitarian needs and human rights violation in war zones and in times of crisis. Under international humanitarian law, journalists are considered as civilians and they should be protected as such. However, indiscriminate attacks against civilians, including journalists in the ongoing armed conflicts in the OSCE area and beyond, continues to persist. The number of journalists who lost their lives during armed conflicts remains very high. We condemn the targeting of journalists and media professionals during armed conflicts, and we commemorate those who lost their lives while trying to report from conflict areas. Without ensuring the safety of journalists, we cannot expect safety for civilians, since they undertake the most important duty in exposing to the world those who endanger the safety of others. In this regard, we support the efforts of the international institutions and bodies, including the OSCE Representative of Freedom of Media, to draw attention to the obligations of states to protect journalists, to raise awareness about the respect for press freedom, and to provide toolkits for the safety of all media professionals in times of crisis. Let me also underline the need for a gender-sensitive approach, given the violence and specific risks that are faced by women journalists. As participating states, we all should do more to end the violence against journalists and media workers in line with our international commitments. Mr. Chair, regarding certain references to Turkey in some previous statements, I wish to note that there is an active and pluralistic media community enjoying freedom of expression and media in Turkey. There are vibrant and democratic debates on daily political, economic, and social issues in Turkey. Such an atmosphere will not be possible without a functioning media environment. Freedom of expression and media freedom are safeguarded by our national legislation and constitution. On the other hand, it's important to note that journalism cannot be used as a shield against criminal investigations. Committing crimes under the guise of journalism contradicts the very ethics of journalism as well. In that regard, rights of all journalists subject to judicial processes are protected in Turkey. Domestic remedies, including the right of appeal and recourse to the Constitutional Court, are available. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, we wish to express our support to the OSCE representative on freedom of media, Ambassador Bratu, and reiterate our commitments to OSCE norms and principles in this significant area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next in my list is the Center for the Analysis of Democratic Processes. You have the floor.
Уважаемые участники конференции.
Dear conference participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to take an opportunity to pay your attention to the fact that some international foreign organizations in the sphere of human rights are try to politicize arrest of a number of bloggers, but they base on a subjective view of one or two experts and undertake attacks against the government of Uzbekistan. However, they have no full information and react based on internal emotions. Such biased conclusions contradict human rights and the principles of law. In Uzbekistan, in the website online, there is a number of materials criticizing officials, official representatives of the country. In 2023, the number of such materials reached 8,500, which was considerable increase compared to 2019. I would like to point out that a lot of work has been done in order to provide better freedom for freedom of speech, protect of freedom and dignity of people. In Uzbekistan, there is no responsibility for criticizing authorities. On the contrary, the administrative code foresees responsibility for officials for limiting the freedom of speech, so that the journalists are not punished for their sincere critical work. Please take note of positive developments in Uzbekistan in the recent years. I disagree with the declarations of some people talking about threats to safety. Thank you.
I give now the floor to the delegation of Armenia. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Moderator, distinguished colleagues, independent media plays a pivotal role in fostering democratic engagement by providing a platform for the free exchange of ideas, constructive dialogue, and open discourse. A well-informed society is the very foundation of democracy, and the safety of journalists is indispensable to that foundation. Journalists, by exposing corruption, documenting human rights abuses, and investigating electoral fraud, ensure accountability and uphold the integrity of democratic processes. When journalists are free from fear and intimidation, they are able to carry out their mission responsibly. thereby strengthening a culture of transparency and accountability. Mr. Moderator, the Republic of Armenia attaches great importance to the principles of freedom of expression and freedom of the press. Crimes aimed at obstructing journalistic activity are punishable under the Criminal Code of the Republic of Armenia. Over recent years, we have made tangible progress in this regard, progress which has been recognized by respected international organizations such as Freedom House, Human Rights Watch, Reporters Without Borders, and the Committee to Protect Journalists. The assessment of these organizations clearly demonstrate the evolving and improving landscape of media freedom in Armenia, particularly in the years following the Velvet Revolution of 2018. According to both surveys and international evaluations, Armenia today enjoys a high degree of freedom of expression for both its citizens and its media. The 2024 Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index ranked Armenia 43rd among 180 countries, an improvement from 49th in 2023. Similarly, Freedom House's 2024 report awarded Armenia a score of 74 out of 100, up from 72 in the previous year. In December 2024, Armenia took an important step forward by becoming a member of the Freedom Online Coalition, an alliance committed to advancing internet freedom and safeguarding human rights in the digital space. Furthermore, a number of legislative amendments have been introduced to the law on freedom of assembly, designed to ensure the effective exercise of the fundamental right and bring national legislation into alignment with international standards, including recommendations from the Council of Europe's Venice Commission and the OSCE ODIHR. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I give now the floor to Tajik Youth for the Revival of Tajikistan. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Dear delegates, colleagues, and participants, I am honored to speak about freedom of expression and the safety of journalists. Those are not just written on paper. They are basic needs for any free and fair society. Journalists tell the truth, question those on power, and help people make informed choices. But in many places, including Tajikistan, journalists face serious danger for doing their job. Under the regime of President Emomali Rahman, media freedom has become very limited. In late 2023 and early 2024, 7 to 8 journalists were jailed in Tajikistan. They received long prison sentences from 7 up to 21 years, often on charges such as extremism, terrorism, or organizing protest. One example is the independent newspaper Pike. Its editor-chief, Ahmad Ibrahim, was arrested in January 2025 and sentenced to 10 years in prison after a closed trial. The newspaper was effectively silenced. Many believe this happened because of the critical reporting about the government. Attacks and threats against journalists are common. In 2022, there were 92 cases involving media workers, bloggers, or news officers. Most were not psychological attacks, but legal or financial pressure. Because of this pressure, many media outlets have been forced to close or move abroad. Many journalists have stopped writing critically or have left the country to stay safe. When journalists cannot work freely, the public cannot know the truth. Media freedom is not a gift from this poor. It is human rights that must be protected by laws, supported by institutions, and respected by everyone. Protesting journalists means fair trials, real investigation into threats, and safety both online and offline. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
I thank you. We have less than 20 minutes left before the end of this session, and I still have 17 participants that have asked to speak. So I encourage also to make short statements and circulate the full version of your statements on the online platform. I give now the floor to National Alliance of Tajikistan. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Muhammad John Yakubov, National Alliance of Tajikistan. I would like to pay attention to the most sensitive issue related to human rights in Tajikistan. Despite the serious critiques of the international organizations in Tajikistan, the authorities continue pressing and persecuting. It has become a norm and does not surprise anyone anymore. Journalists and bloggers are the target of the repression in the first place. Rahmon's government drew red lines and limits. One of them are the ban on critics of Rahmon and his family. During the regime, so many journalists have been imprisoned, beaten, and made silent. Just for the criticism of corruption or members of Rahmon's families, an imprisonment a person can be imprisoned. So many journalists without any basis are charged with serious crimes. In Fakhonim, Mamatsoeva, Haid, Komedzona, Rajan, Davlat. Persecution for different views becomes even more senseless. Any citizens who may criticize Rahmon in the social media or puts a like to critical expression could be imprisoned. During the last 7 years, the deputy of the General Prosecutor's Office officially announced that over 1,500 citizens of Tajikistan were detained and imprisoned. During 7 years, could you imagine that? Over 1,500 citizens of Tajikistan, just for putting likes in the social media, have been imprisoned. There is no such a country in the world to imprison people just for likes in social media. And with this regards, we would like to appeal to you to demand from Tajikistan government to free journalists who are imprisoned at the moment. Thank you very much for your attention.
My list, Information Group on Crimes Against the Person.
Добрый день. Максим Вилков, группа информации по...
Hello, it's the Information Group on Crimes Against the Person. During the military conflicts, the level of mass media is crucial, because actually due to the mass media we can help to investigate the cases. Sometimes we can even use it for giving detailed information or providing some kind of contradictive and contrary ideas. In Zelensky's regime, the system of destroying the mass media by the anti-Russian and propaganda. Actually, in Ukraine, there are some secret prisons that are functioning under the rule of some military divisions. I would like to mention the Gonsalar and dozens of journalists in Ukraine. From the very first days of Ukraine, the paramilitary groups have started the policy of purifying the journalistic community and the civil activists. It is revealed in different actions, starting from prosecution or even killings. Actually, there is a law on disinformation, and in the parallel with the strategies, they are using it to accuse the individuals who have another meaning. Unfortunately, with the support of OSCE, unfortunately, today the policy of Zelensky regime actually decrease the freedom of speech and freedom of media. And, for example, European Union has not stopped provision of military equipment, and hasn't stopped. While speaking about the treatment of military correspondents and journalists, the majority of them have died during the investigation that they held in Ukraine for reporting about the military events. The conflict in Ukraine has put the European system of information protection in the face of crisis. Today, everything of it calls on the reform of the judicial power in Ukraine, with stopping repressions and release of the journalists. And the Ukrainian authorities ignore international norms. Without it, the freedom of speech and in Europe, in Ukraine, is under the risk, and it probably leads to the further escalation of repressions.
Thank you. Next in the list is IC Law, Armenia. You have the floor. Do we have it in the room, IC Law, Armenia? If it's not the case, then I move forward with the Multicultural Democracy Initiative.
Спасибо за приглашение.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Rosa Dunaeva. I also represent the government of Ichkeria in exile. I would like to remind you that Ichkeria is an independent country temporarily occupied by the Russian Federation. This is the fact that was officially confirmed by the Higher Chamber of Ukraine. After two bloody wars initiated by Russia around the Chechen Republic, there's a deficit of public truth. Stories about kidnappings have not been disseminated, not because they do not happen, but because those who should write are afraid of consequences. Those who survived the wars and repressions should not be forgotten. During the 25 years, many journalists who told the truth have been killed in Chechnya. They were labeled foreign agents, persecuted, forced into silence. Today, their pages blocked. The government of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria in exile appeals to you with an urgent request for international response to the numerous systematic and grave human rights violations occurring in the temporarily occupied territory of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria. In the territory of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, there are secret prisons where people are held without trial, subjected to torture, brutal interrogations, and executions. We learn about this from relatives, acquaintances, piece by piece. Many of the murdered are buried in unmarked graves. Bodies are not returned to families. Documents are concealed. Occupying powers headed by Kadyrov work with Russia. Arrests and charges are often fabricated. Relatives receive no information about the fate of their loved ones. Occupying structures forcibly mobilize Chechens and send them to fight against Ukraine, against their will and without legal grounds. These actions directly violate Article 51 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, which prohibits compelling residents of occupied territories to serve in the armed forces of the occupying power. So we have evidence that many of the Chechens sent to war have been killed, but their bodies were not returned. There's no statistic, official statistics. Everything is hidden and controlled by occupying power. We appeal to OSCE to organize an independent mission to research and investigate the cases of illegal prisons, deportations of Chechens from European countries, and their further destinies on the territory of the Russian Federation and the Chechen Republic, to safeguard the lives of journalists and condemn the activities of the Russian Federation that violate the Geneva Convention and international human law.
Thank you. Next in the list is HGO Abiroy. Do we have it in the room? Yes.
Добрый день, дамы и господа. Меня
My name is Lopan Akhmedyarov. I'm a journalist from Kazakhstan. I would like to pay your attention not only to the situation of freedom of speech in Kazakhstan, but also in Central Asia and Caucasus. What I hear from yesterday is a very sad story about what is happening in these countries. What we heard from official delegations of these countries, they spoke about what is going on in these countries, in particular democracies. Kazakhstan delegation declared that it is a force of democracy. However, journalist Aidus Sadikov was killed. Many are in prison, and those who are representatives of the state are to be held responsible. This stories just started to listen to them from yesterday. It's like a horror list. One story is more terrifying than the other. And I would like to remind what is going on in the countries of Central Asia. All this time while we are part of the international family, international institutions and OSCE, some countries who before been leaders in democracy now are becoming less and less democratic. We pay attention to the fact that these countries became members of OSCE. We all hoped that all these countries would help others to become more democratic, to level democracy, including freedom of speech. But during this time, we see that the authoritarian countries show example to other countries and bring them closer to themselves. These are cases of political cannibalism and making a very sad picture. I would like to appeal to you to remember that OSCE has fundamental requirements and values to its members, and this cannot be manifested as recommendations. Annual conference on the human dimension should be a place where requirements are made to the countries. One of the criteria could be the development of the plan of action to, first, free all journalists imprisoned in this country. So this could be a real action, and we all would see that something positive is going on. Also, I would like to mention that otherwise, if we do not demand anything from the countries, members,
Да, я заканчиваю.
if we do not make demands to countries participating in OSCE to implement their obligations, commitments, we will have Central Asia as a region with economic crisis and military crisis. And a lot of political refugees would head to Europe.
Now give the floor.
Передаю слово делегации Азербайджана. У нас несколько минут для того, чтобы закончить.
Advise and distribute longer version of the statement. In brief, first, advancement of media and freedom of expression is among the priorities of the government of Azerbaijan. According to the Constitution of Azerbaijan, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression, and this right is further protected by additional legal and procedural safeguards. The decree of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan of 25 April of this year on celebrating the 150th anniversary of the national press stands as a clear testament to the importance attached by the government of Azerbaijan to media freedom and its development. We see the growing scale of hate speech and hateful narratives in media, including Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and other forms of intolerance. Media literacy is one of the key instruments for countering disinformation and building knowledge-based societies. Disinformation has also gravely affected our region, where the weaponization of information was widely used as part of the 3-decade-long occupation policy against Azerbaijan. It is equally pertinent to mention the need to ensure appropriate balance between media freedom and the duties and responsibilities of journalists. In this regard, we recall the Brussels and Madrid Ministerial Council decisions which call for the promotion of professionalism and adherence to ethical standards in journalism. Finally, in view of allegations voiced today against us, we reiterate that no journalist or media representatives is prosecuted or detained due to their professional activities. Legal proceedings are undertaken solely in response to violation of national legislation not related to media, in full conformity with due process and the rule of law. This standard is universal and should be applicable in all OSCE participating states. Instead of directing unjustified criticism toward Azerbaijan, which we reject, it would be more pertinent if the delegation of Sweden that made a statement on behalf of EU member states and voiced biased criticism against Azerbaijan would report how they address numerous cases of violations of the freedom of expression in their own countries, in particular how they address the cases of what is referred to as strategic lawsuits against public transport participation, which have been used to target journalists, civil society organizations, and human rights defenders. Cherry-picking and finger-pointing by some participating states is not conducive to constructive dialogue and undermines credibility of such statements. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. And again, I apologize for those 11 participants who were not able to take the floor, but please submit your written statements and distribute it on the online platform. I would like also to inform you that the delegations of Georgia, Serbia, and Denmark will be submitting a right of reply. With that, I would like to ask our speakers just for a very short concluding remarks. I understand, Valentin, maybe you wanted to add something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I just want to stress a point that we just were witnesses of a bright example how the country that killed democracy and freedom of expression inside the country for 2.5 decades asks for freedom of expression in other countries, and especially in Ukraine, that is now under their occupation on 20%. But okay, I want to tell that it was a question about how to empower the journalism at the time of election. I don't remember who asked about this. I want just to put 3 advices. First one, don't wait for election process, start right now, because you need to build a certain media brands that will work during election. Another one, if you have no possibility to invite international media organizations, look at your own specialists and help them to become popular and recognizable. And the third one, just look at the latest European documents, that not only professional journalists who works for certain media or have a certain education are considered now as journalists. Any person that reports about current events and do it honestly considered as a journalist and should be defended as journalist by international organization. And my last word, just I want to thank Finland for organizing this event, Poland for having us here, and from all the Ukraine, I just want to say thank you for all those member states of OSCE who are present here, who support us in these dark times, and hope these dark times will end soon. Thank you.
Thanks to you, dear Valentin. And now I give the floor to the OSCE representative of Freedom of Media, dear Jan, please.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you to all the speakers. And I wish that we had had time to listen to all those who submitted their names on the list. I can tell you that I've listened very carefully to all of your interventions. I've taken notes, and I will see how we can follow up from my office's standpoint. There was a question raised or a comment made about monitoring, and I can assure you that we are monitoring media developments in all 57 participating states. That is a clear obligation in my mandate, and we do monitor and we do react in different ways. When it comes to the Ministerial Council Decision 3/2018, I am trying to put into place a systematic monitoring and reporting of the state of implementation of that very important document. And I will continue to work on that. And hopefully by the time we meet next year, I will have something more substantive to report to you on the status of that monitoring process. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Ian. And with that, I conclude this session. But please join me in a round of applause for our speakers.